The rain fell so heavily that night it seemed determined to wash the entire city away. Cold water streamed down the cracked windows of a tiny apartment, tucked between abandoned buildings and forgotten dreams. Inside, a young woman sat alone beside a flickering lamp, staring at an envelope that would decide her future. Her hands trembled, not because she was afraid of what was inside, because she already knew. The final notice, the last warning: pay the debt or lose everything. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Outside, the city roared with life. Inside, her world was collapsing. What she didn't know was that before sunrise, a single unexpected encounter would change everything. A meeting so impossible that no one would believe it. A meeting that would place a poor girl directly in the path of one of the most feared men in the country. A man whose name caused criminals to lower their voices. A man surrounded by power, money, and danger. A mafia boss. And when people learned he had fallen in love with her, they laughed until they saw how he loved her. And by then, it was already too late to stop what destiny had begun. But to understand how it happened, the story must begin with her. Her name was Elena, and for most of her life, nobody noticed she existed. Elena had grown up in poverty, not the kind of poverty people talked about in dramatic speeches. The quiet kind, the invisible kind, the kind that forced a child to learn sacrifice before learning happiness. Her father had died when she was young. Her mother spent years working multiple jobs until illness slowly stole her strength. By the age of 16, Elena had already become the adult in the family. While other teenagers dreamed about vacations, parties, and romance, she worried about rent, electricity bills, and medicine. Yet somehow, despite everything life took from her, she remained kind. Perhaps that was her greatest strength. Or perhaps it was her greatest weakness. Because kindness often attracts people who want to use it. Many did. Neighbors borrowed money they never returned. Co-workers shifted responsibilities onto her shoulders. Employers paid her less because they knew she would never complain. Still, Elena endured. Every morning before sunrise, she left her apartment and walked through crowded streets toward the small cafe where she worked. The pay was terrible. The hours were exhausting, but it kept her family alive. And at night, when the city lights sparkled like distant stars, she would sit by her window and imagine a different future. A future where survival wasn't her only goal. A future where she could finally breathe. Deep down, Elena carried a secret dream. She wanted to become an artist. She filled sketchbooks with drawings nobody ever saw. Faces, landscapes, stories painted through pencil and paper. They were beautiful, but dreams felt expensive, and poor people rarely had the luxury of chasing them. So she kept drawing in silence, believing nobody would ever discover the world hidden inside her heart. Then one evening, everything changed. The cafe was unusually busy. Customers packed every table. Voices filled the room. Coffee machines hissed endlessly. Elena moved quickly between tables, balancing trays while trying to ignore the ache in her feet. That was when the door opened, and the atmosphere changed instantly. It happened so suddenly that even Elena noticed it. Conversations softened. Employees exchanged nervous glances. A strange tension spread through the room. A group of men entered first. Large, silent, alert. The kind of men who seemed dangerous without saying a word. Then another figure stepped inside. Tall, elegant, calm. The room became even quieter. Everyone recognized him. Everyone except Elena. She had heard rumors, of course. Stories whispered throughout the city. A powerful man who controlled entire districts. A man whose influence reached politicians, businessmen, and criminals alike. A man called Luca Moretti, the mafia boss. But Elena had never seen his face. Until now. She expected someone terrifying. Instead, she saw a man who looked strangely lonely. His dark eyes scanned the room before settling on an empty table. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Only a second. Then she looked away. Just another customer. Or so she thought. Minutes later, while carrying drinks, disaster struck. Someone bumped into her. The tray slipped. Coffee spilled. Straight onto Luca's expensive suit. The cafe froze. Silence swallowed the room. Elena's heart nearly stopped. She expected shouting, threats, anger, anything. Instead, Lucas simply looked at her and smiled. "It's all right," he said calmly. The entire cafe seemed shocked, including Elena. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "No harm done. No harm done." Those 3 words would replay in her mind for days, because they didn't match the stories she'd heard. Not at all. And for reasons she couldn't explain. She found herself wondering who he really was. The answer would arrive sooner than expected. The following week brought disaster. Elena's mother required urgent treatment. The cost was impossible. The debt collectors returned. Bills piled higher. Hope disappeared. For the first time in years, Elena felt completely trapped. Then an envelope arrived. Inside was enough money to cover the treatment. No explanation. No signature. Only a note. "Take care of your mother." Nothing else. She was stunned, confused, grateful, terrified. Who would send such a gift? The answer came days later. Luca Moretti sat alone in the cafe, waiting. When Elena approached, he handed her a small sketchbook, one she'd accidentally left behind weeks earlier. The sketchbook containing all her secret drawings. Her eyes widened. "You saw them?" He nodded. "They're beautiful." Nobody had ever said that before. Nobody. And somehow those simple words affected her more than the money. Because for the first time in years, someone saw more than her struggles. Someone saw her. People often imagine love begins with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with understanding. Lucas started visiting the cafe regularly. Not every day, just enough to become familiar. Their conversations remained simple. Books, art, music, dreams. Nothing about crime. Nothing about power. Nothing about fear. Slowly, Elena began discovering a side of him nobody else seemed to know. He listened. Really listened. He remembered details. He asked questions. And when she spoke about art, his eyes softened, as though hearing something precious. Meanwhile, Luca found himself drawn to her honesty. Around most people, he saw masks. Ambition, greed, fear. Around Elena, there was none of that. She treated him like a human being. Not a legend. Not a monster. Not a king. Just a man. And perhaps that was exactly what he needed. But the city wasn't blind. Rumors spread quickly. People laughed. A poor waitress? With Luca Moretti? Impossible. Ridiculous. Some called her foolish. Others accused her of chasing money. Many predicted disaster. Elena heard every word. Each one hurt. Yet none hurt as much as her own doubts. Because part of her wondered if they were right. What future could possibly exist between them? One belonged to a world of danger. The other barely survived each month. Their lives were opposites. And opposites rarely survive reality. Or so she believed. Then Luca did something nobody expected. One evening, he invited her to a charity gala. The city's elite would attend. Business leaders, politicians, socialites, the most influential people imaginable. Elena nearly refused. She owned no elegant dress, no expensive jewelry, no confidence for such an event. Yet somehow she agreed. When she arrived, the reactions were immediate. Whispers followed her everywhere. Judgment hid behind polite smiles. People stared. Some openly mocked her. A poor girl among the wealthy. An outsider. An intruder. Elena wanted to leave. Then Luca appeared. The room fell silent. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward her. Past everyone else. Past celebrities and millionaires. Past powerful figures desperate for his attention. Straight to her. Then he offered his hand and said something nobody expected. "You look beautiful." Not loud. Not dramatic. Simple. Sincere. Yet those 3 words changed everything. Because suddenly, she wasn't standing alone anymore. The most powerful man in the room had chosen her. Not because of wealth. Not because of status. Not because of appearance. Because he genuinely cared. And for the first time, people stopped laughing. They started paying attention. But greater challenges were coming. Much greater. Love stories become meaningful when tested. And theirs would be tested harder than most. Luca's enemies watched closely. In his world, affection could become a weakness. And weaknesses became targets. One night Elena noticed a black car following her home. Then anonymous warnings arrived. Threatening messages. Strange phone calls. Fear returned. The danger was real. Very real. Luca wanted to protect her. Elena wanted freedom. Their first major conflict exploded. "You can't control my life," she told him. And you can't ignore the risks, he replied. Neither was wrong. Neither was entirely right. For days they barely spoke. Distance replaced warmth. Doubt returned. Perhaps everyone else had been correct. Perhaps their worlds truly could not coexist. Then tragedy struck. Elena's mother collapsed unexpectedly. The hospital called in the middle of the night. Elena rushed there alone, terrified, heartbroken, exhausted. When she arrived, someone was already waiting. Luca. He had canceled important meetings, ignored business obligations, spent hours sitting beside her mother's room. Not because anyone asked him to, because he knew Elena shouldn't face that fear alone. At dawn, while exhaustion filled the silent corridor, Elena finally understood something. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't control. This wasn't ownership. This was love. Real love. The kind that stays during difficult moments. The kind that appears when nobody is watching. The kind that cannot be bought. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in their future. Unfortunately, destiny had one final storm waiting. The attack came without warning. One of Luca's rivals decided to send a message. A brutal message. Elena became the target. Not because of who she was, because of what she meant to him. The kidnapping lasted only hours. But those hours changed everything. Fear consumed the city. Luca unleashed every resource available, every connection, every ally, every ounce of power he possessed. The search became relentless. Not for revenge, not for pride, for her. People who had spent years working beside him witnessed something shocking. The feared Mafia boss wasn't acting like a criminal king. He was acting like a desperate man terrified of losing the person he loved. And when Elena was finally found safe, something remarkable happened. Instead of responding with violence, Luca made a decision nobody expected. He began dismantling the very life that had created those dangers. Piece by piece, business by business, connection by connection. A process that would take years. A process filled with risk. A process inspired by one simple truth. He wanted a future with her. A real future. And real futures require real sacrifices. The city watched in disbelief. Many still couldn't understand. Why would a man with unlimited power change for a poor girl? The answer was simple. Because she never cared about the power. She cared about the person beneath it. And that changed everything. Months passed. Then years. Life slowly transformed. Not overnight. Not magically. Through effort. Patience. Growth. Elena finally pursued her dream. She enrolled in art programs. Displayed her work publicly. Sold her first collection. Then another. Then another. The young woman who once hid drawings inside secret sketchbooks became an artist, admired throughout the city. Yet success wasn't the greatest transformation. The greatest transformation happened inside her. The frightened girl who once feared every bill and every setback had become confident, strong, resilient. She no longer measured her worth through survival. She understood her value. And that confidence inspired others. People who once pitted her began admiring her. People who mocked her became silent. People who laughed eventually realized something important. They had misunderstood the story from the beginning. They assumed a powerful man rescued a poor girl. But that wasn't entirely true. Because she saved him too. Not from enemies. Not from danger. From loneliness. From becoming a prisoner of his own reputation. From forgetting who he could be. They transformed each other. That was the real miracle. One autumn afternoon, Elena stood inside her own art gallery. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Paintings lined the walls. Visitors admired her work. Journalists asked questions. Success surrounded her. Yet her attention focused elsewhere. Across the room stood Luca, watching quietly, proudly. No spotlight, no speech, no demand for recognition. Just a man smiling at the woman he loved. The same way he had smiled in that cafe years earlier. When coffee spilled onto his suit. When fate first introduced two people from completely different worlds. Elena walked toward him. The crowd faded into the background. The noise disappeared. Only the journey remained. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every impossible moment that brought them there. And suddenly she understood something beautiful. The greatest gift Luca ever gave her wasn't money. It wasn't protection. It wasn't influence. It was belief. He believed in her long before she believed in herself. And that belief changed her destiny. Forever. Years later, people still told stories about them. Some focused on the Mafia boss, his power, his reputation, his transformation. But those who truly understood the story focused on Elena, the poor girl nobody noticed, the girl who carried dreams through hardship, the girl who refused to surrender to life, the girl who discovered strength hidden beneath fear. Because her journey proved something extraordinary. A person's future is not defined by where they begin. It is defined by what they become. And sometimes the most unexpected love arrives when life feels darkest. Not to rescue someone, but to remind them of their own worth. That was why people stopped laughing. Not because a powerful man fell in love with a poor girl, because they witnessed how deeply he loved her. They saw the sacrifices, the loyalty, the respect, the belief. And eventually they realized something even more important. The poor girl they once underestimated had become the strongest person in the story. A woman who transformed her pain into purpose, her fear into courage, her dreams into reality. And in the end, that was the true love story. Not about a mafia boss finding a poor girl, but about a young woman finding herself and discovering that sometimes the most unexpected chapter becomes the one that changes everything. The end.